welcome to this week's episode of Not DnD. As it is spooky season, we are looking at games that you can play with a little bit of a horror theme, maybe good for one-shots over the season. And so I had to have Charlie from Parable Games on to talk to us about Shiver. Thanks so much for coming on.
Hello, thanks for having me again.
Of course. You say again because you were here. It was actually 2 years ago, because October 2023, wow. We were talking about Don't Play This Game, which is another horror-themed game. Seems to be your vibe. But that's a solo game, obviously, so a little bit different. But if people are interested in listening to that, if you go look in the archives, you'll find Don't Play This Game. I'll put a link in the show notes so you can listen to that game, which is also another great TTRPG for the horror season. But we're going to be talking about Shiver today, which has been out for a number of years, actually, because I think it won awards in like 2022. And so it's been a number of years Shiver's been around. When was it first launched? Was it 2021?
So I think it may have been 2021. So we did our initial crowdfunding campaign during the first lockdown, is how I remember it.
Okay, yeah.
And then we came out of that in the, or was it second lockdown? I don't remember in the UK. We had a few. But we went and did our first UKGE. We came out of lockdown, and it was when you could do conventions all masked up, and we went with the core rule book and the kind of core offering of Shiver, and we won the People's Choice Award for Best New RPG. And then after that, we did Gothic the next year, so we did various expansions, and we got nominated for Best Setting and Best Cover Art for kind of new RPG setting as well. So yeah, so we kind of we've been going for quite a while, but yeah, we kind of started with a bang, which is very lovely.
Yeah, well, I think it's still the perfect. Everyone this time of year wants to do kind of horror one-shots, and I think Shiver is a fantastic system for that. So we'll get into that. Before we jump into it, though, I usually go into the guest's background and history of games. We've already kind of done this for you because you've been on the show before. So instead, I was wondering if you could maybe give us a highlights or your gaming for the last 2 years. So between now and October 2023, what have you been up to gaming wise? What have been your gaming highlights?
Oh, so in terms, it's been a busy 2 years. So in terms of on the design side, we've actually started experimenting kind of away from Shiver as kind of like our main line. I'll talk about more about the expansions we've been working on for Shiver when we kind of get to Shiver. But we've done our Furious Nuns with Guns RPG, Sisterhood, which finished crowdfunding, and I'm currently working on that. We actually deviated away from horror, and I contributed on Ironheart as well, which is another solo RPG about playing in a post-war galaxy as a mech pilot, and you play as both your pilot and your mech.
We had Ironheart on Not DnD as well, so if people want to deep dive on that, on here too.
If you want basically a complete tonal shift from anything else that we do, Ironheart's wonderful for that. And then we've been working on, we're currently crowdfunding the Grim Gazette, which is a collection of 5 micro RPGs that connect together into a campaign, so you can play the life and times of a Victorian adventurer. So you can start off in like the Night Watch, trying to solve Jack the Ripper style murders, as well as any other creepy ghouls from the Penny Dreadfuls. Jump on an airship and all aboard and become a Victorian adventurer. Then you have Stolen Child, which is evil fairies have stolen one of your children, and you're going to have to go after them, and you're playing as parents, trying to kind of reunite your family. Then you have the Haunted Manor, where the ghosts of your past come back to haunt you, and it's like a haunted house generator. And then the last one is Monkey's Paw, where you have been murdered by 5 different people, have gathered together, but you have come back from the dead for your last hurrah of vengeance, using a deadly, mystical, and very dark monkey's paw to try and get your revenge. So all of those can be played solo, and the 3 in the middle, Haunted Manor, Stolen Child, and All Aboard, can also be played multiplayer as well. But you can play them from start to finish as a life and times of your character, or play them all individually. So it's like a very different thing for us in terms of design. So that's in terms of like work stuff that I've been doing. In terms of like regular gaming, for me, we have every 2 weeks we gather together and we kind of play games. Our big one that we've been playing recently, I've been really getting into, is legacy card games. So we've played Arkham Horror. I'm sure a lot of people will be kind of familiar with it, and kind of really kind of getting into kind of the deck building side. of things, which is something in terms of design, we've not really explored kind of at all. But it's something is like mechanics wise, I find like very, very interesting, like very, very satisfying to play. Quite a few kind of micro RPGs as well, because some little one pages. I'm trying to remember what I have run this year that hasn't been testing.
I was about to say that's the issue when you're a game publisher. You spend so much time, running your stuff when you can, that when it's time to do something else, you're kind of like, oh yeah, where's the time to do that?
Yeah. I'd say other side of other things that I've done is like, because we do so much testing for kind of RPGs, quite a lot of my game time that of like highlights that I have tend to sit outside of that. But I find a lot of that inspires and ends up coming back into the fold when we're designing. So like one of the big highlights from the past 2 years, I think we're doing it again this year, is my brother, who's my business partner as well. So he's the business director at Parable, as well as our cousin, who's a very like good like miniatures painter, and a couple of other people as well, gather together and we do Christmas Mordheim. Where we do. So my brother owns a friendly local gaming store, so we kind of gather together when it's closed, get out the gaming tables and do a little old school Mordheim like tournament between all of us. So definitely like kind of discovering a lot of like new skirmish games, kind of reading a lot more rules there and playing around with miniatures, because the painting side is very much my big like hobby time, like kind of decompressed time when I'm not designing. But yeah, I'm just trying to think in terms of like what else I would say would be a highlight gaming wise. In terms of that, I think I take a lot of inspiration from other form of games, so like digital games, like massively. So like I've been playing that has been a good inspiration. So Alan Wake 2. If anyone is being there, basically anything made by Remedy, I'd highly recommend and go and have a look at their approach to like world story, but also mechanics. Very interesting. And I think we're definitely starting to see, especially with more licensed games of kind of video games coming out now, we are definitely seeing a lot more of a marriage, I think, between your kind of like digital RPG mechanics kind of coming onto the tabletop, as well as vice versa. I mean, like Disco Elysium was a massive highlight for me over the past 2 years. Which is playing kind of as a detective, and the game designers of that game originally envisioned that as an RPG. So literally when you're playing the game, it rolls 2d6s and pluses your stats. So yeah, no, I'd say it's been a very busy 2 years, but an interesting one. Yeah,
it's impressive that you managed to fit that much gaming in, as well as like creating all the games you've had. So so that's impressive, because I think a lot of publishers get stuck in that place where you spend so much time on your own stuff that you're like, I know there's all this amazing stuff out there, and my pile of to play games, that's mine for example, it just gets bigger and bigger. But there we go. But anyway,
I'd say one RPG highlight for running was I ran our Shiver starter set for my partner and her friends, not as a playtest because it's already been released and done, but as we're going to run the game, and they loved it and had a really nice time. So I think as a publisher, speaking to all my publisher friends as well, it's really important to make sure you check in and play a game, even if it is yours, like for fun. So you don't lose sight of the point of kind of what you're doing is to design and make fun. Like we're fun merchants. We try to make stuff that people can enjoy. So
absolutely. Yeah, I love that advice. So that segues us really nicely into talking about Shiver. So what is the introduction to it? So if somebody hasn't heard about the game before, how do you introduce it to them? What's the pitch?
Okay, so Shiver is a easy to learn role-playing game that allows you to play any horror movie you love, know, or can possibly imagine. So if you love Gremlins and you want to run it around Christmas time, Shiver's perfect for it. Love Halloween, it can run slashers. Do you want to do Alien? You can jump into space and run something there. So I think we got called very kindly by a reviewer early on the Swiss Army knife of horror. For the tabletop, which I think I like to think is a very fair summation. So it allows you to generate any horror story because the whole system is system agnostic, and create your own horror movie on the tabletop. And it is designed to be fast-paced, engaging, perfect for one-shots, but has that capability to go a bit further in terms of length of story if you want to as well.
Beautiful. And what made you decide to want to go for a setting kind of agnostic system? And what were your inspirations for making the game?
So I'd say starting with inspiration. So before I got into, and this will probably be retreading some of the stuff from our previous interview, but I was in film and TV before I got into kind of game design. And I think I did like RPGs like started as a hobby to stay in touch with a lot of my writer friends. And the thing that I was noticing was one, horror was quite, I felt, underserved at the time that I started playing. Really, you have kind of like Call of Cthulhu, the older World of Darkness books, as well as like a myriad of ones, and like all great games. But the thing that I noticed about them is that they all had a very intense specificity in terms of where they landed in horror. And I think one of the joys of horror, like horror movies, and sitting down and enjoying these very usually quite singular, short fire, like tight 90-minute experiences, is that you can pick something up and play it, watch it super quickly, enjoy it, and it will be encapsulated in that moment. When you kind of are looking at other horror games, like Call of Cthulhu is excellent, it's one of my favorites, and it's one that I still play kind of now, and it does 1920s like kind of eldritch Lovecraftian super duper well. But it's not as easy to mod into, say, I wanted to run a slasher like with it. It doesn't really gear itself that way. And it's, in my brain, horror as a genre, when we talk about it, is an extremely broad church. And what I wanted to do was give a core engine to people where they could like engage with the genre that they love and basically explore all of those avenues themselves, if they wanted to, by making a system that's simple enough and versatile enough that you could jump it to wherever you wanted. Because for me, I treat game nights quite often like inviting people over for a movie night, and it's how I kind of talk about Shiver a lot, is invite your friends round, design your kind of horror movie that you want to play, or, if you're in a pinch, pick one of your favorite horror movies. So say, for example, it's like, oh, I haven't managed to prep for game night, I'm going to run Tremors, about giant sandworms kind of in the desert, and run that, and I know the basic beats, and I can convert that in about 20-30 minutes, and have a game to run for game night that is like tipping the hat towards stuff that people love, and they can engage with it and play around with it. I think the other part of this as well is, and I think this is definitely a later realization, I think, after the kind of core system was published, is we've seen definitely a jump in like IP, like license based horror games starting to emerge, and like they're great, but when you attach something to an IP, it becomes a very, very specific thing that you can play. Like the Alien RPG, for example, I absolutely love, and I'm a massive diehard Alien fan, and I've like managed to get it to the table once. But the thing I've had with players who aren't the same rabid Alien fan that I am go like, that was really fun, I'm good for Alien for a year and a half. It's kind of what happens, because and for me, it's I want to make sure that I can kind of have a returnable game night with a system, and that's kind of what Shiver's providing.
I love that. That's and I think you definitely made it clear that's why it's such a handy system, and it's so replayable. As you mentioned, it's easy for the GM to get to the table because you can find the horror beats that and it's easy to run. But I also think it's very accessible for players to join for a one shot, because the character creation system is very quick and accessible. Could you talk a little bit about the design behind that and how it works?
Absolutely, yeah. So me and my brother, when I kind of first pitched the system to him, one of the big things that I wanted to eliminate was session zero. I think it is one of the biggest barriers currently to getting more players to the table, of that when people kind of say, oh, I've got to sit for 3 hours and just make a character, like not even play the game. Because for a lot of new players, I think, as for a lot more experienced RPG heads, I think session zero is seen as playing the game. But for those new to the hobby, that's quite an alien concept to kind of get on board with. So we tested it to death to get it to a point where you can make a character in 10 minutes. Was the aim, and like throw out a concept and run it through. So in Shiver, it's super duper simple. I've got some props down here to kind of help display this. So the way that the system works, it's a dice pool system that uses these funky symbolic dice that we have here. So they're 6-sided, and there are 6 skills. So you've got grit if you want to solve a problem with your fists, wit for something agility, kind of perception based, smarts for using your brains, heart for charisma, luck, because everyone needs a little bit of luck to survive a horror film, and sometimes things need to get a little bit strange, which is our purple symbol there, and that could be anything from resisting fear, levitating a chair with your mind and giving yourself a nosebleed, or turning into a werewolf. So we have 6 character archetypes, which is your first step kind of in character creation, that align to those 6 skills. And then we have a 7th called the Survivor, which is a jack of all trades, master of some. So kind of your more like final girl leader kind of character. Your Buffy tends to fall in that category. So really easy. You pick your archetype. And quite often it's more of a conversation of like, what's your character like? Like, how do they like to play? So it's like, if you want to play the typical jock, you're probably going to be going for the warrior, which lines up with the grit skill. Maybe you want to play, the high school nerd, you're probably going to be playing smarts. The cheerleader, probably hearts, and so on. From there, you have your level. And this is where, again, we're talking about video game mechanics we borrowed quite heavily, is we use a really simple skill tree system. So your level basically gives you as many points as your level number, and lets you spend kind of in a tree, giving you some extra abilities. And the stats are super simple. Your strengths are usually predefined, and then you have to pick a weakness where you dip down the amount of dice that you roll in the pool. After that, it's you pick a background. So we've done groupings of backgrounds that align with each archetype, but we like to open that up and we say any background can go with any archetype. So if I want to play to type, as we kind of call it, I could be, the jock. I could be playing like build my jockey style like warrior, and then I could pick the athlete like as a background, for example. And what that gives me is an extra ability, but also a character flaw. So I think for the jock athlete background, if I remember correctly, it's cocky. So if you roll a failure, you fail big. So it's kind of you kind of overpromise that the fact that you're going to succeed every single time. This is where I feel like a lot of like the character variation like really jumps in. That, you could build a warrior who then has a scholar background or a strange background. Maybe your jock was abducted by aliens and nobody believes them. So you could have a jock and combine it with an abductee background. So you start to get these really interesting, flavorful pairings. And we really encourage people to like look at those and always think about the story of your character and who they are, and let the mechanics kind of support that and kind of prop that up. And then your final step is you pick a fear. And this can be anything from birds to the color orange to lampshades to darkness, whatever you want it to be, you can select a fear, and that comes and that then give that over to your director, our version of a GM, and they try and incorporate that into the game for your character to try and spook them and kind of put them at a disadvantage through fear. So it's really simple. So you pick your archetype, build out your skills, you pick your background, you pick your fear, and then you're ready to go.
Fantastic. And I believe that can take like 10-20 minutes to do. It doesn't have to take very long if you're doing it at the table.
Oh yeah, not long at all. I think the thing we find is like for most first-time players, it can sometimes take 20 to 30 minutes, and that's not through complexity of the stuff that's there. It's from the sheer amount of options we've discovered is actually what the actual issue is people going like, oh my God, I can play all of these things. I want to look at it all, which when we're demoing at cons could be a bit of a problem because we're going to be like, okay, we're really happy that you're really interested, but we need to build a character so we can get playing. Is a thing. But once players know what the options are, quite often it can take 10 minutes, even less at times. The way that we like to approach character creation, especially for newbies like who've never played before, is have a think about like, who would you say, Jess, is your favorite character in a horror movie? Who would you would like to play?
Oh my gosh. I'll pick Buffy because it's not a movie, it's a TV show, but that counts, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So like with Buffy, I would be like, okay, she's got that kind of like big final girl energy. She's kind of main character. I know that she's kind of chosen for a specific purpose. So for me, that's instantly Survivor. There's pathways on there. There's literally one called The Chosen, where you get a special weapon and it's kind of you're chosen for a specific purpose. So slaying vampires. There we have a background that's called the final girl. So in terms of you've got your background, and then it's up to you to kind of think about what Buffy would be afraid of. and as quick as that, you have a character. So quite often, I think using pop culture references, using tropes, which I know sometimes I think for other systems, of design, I think people want to go like, oh no, it's tropey, we want to lean away from it. When actually my response is the complete opposite. I think you should lean in, because really when you're trying to bring new people into the hobby, especially, we need to kind of consider like what is more common parlance for people who haven't been playing D&D for 20 years. And actually TV shows, films, characters they love. I mean, another example I had is somebody turned up late to a session and never played Shiver. We were playing a dinosaur based one, and he just went, I'll be Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park. Like that. And we made a character in 5. And he was like, can you help me make it? It's like, great, 5 minutes, done. And he had an absolute blast, because he had never role played before, but he had what I call the pop culture crutch. Of that, if someone is not confident in their role play, but they actually feel confident doing an impression of a character they know, it actually really brings out fantastic role play, I find, from very, very new players. Because for him, he did a terrible Jeff Goldblum impression the entire night, and thought about what that character did and how they behaved in that movie of something that he loved, and was like one of the best characters at the table for it. And it's one that also everyone around the table knew what was up, knew what their deal is, knew how to interact with them, how to bounce off of them. So it gives this unspoken extra language that like people understand, and can kind of use and bring to the tabletop. And I think horror as a genre, people kind of throw it out as a criticism. It's like, oh, it's very tropey. Like you kind of, you know what you need to do to survive a horror movie. There's the rules, obviously, that you get from Scream and things like that. And I think people really enjoy that. And they kind of, you get various types of players, I think, with horror games. Either the people who feel like, I can survive a horror movie, I can do better than these stupid characters. And I can tell you for free, they never do. They always make, they under pressure, people make odd decisions. And if you apply that pressure through mechanics, very similar results to horror movies where people are being hypercritical of those characters emerge naturally on the tabletop, which to me is fascinating. So I think if it's something that, if you've got friends who are really into not necessarily tabletop, but like want to dip their toe, and they love movies, they love Stephen King books, they love Stranger Things, a game like Shiver, I think, is a really good place for them to start.
I mean, speaking of building tension and putting pressure on the players through mechanics, let's talk about the Doom Clock, because that's a really nice tool in your belt for the game master in Shiver.
Yes. So one of the things I wanted when designing Shiver was to find a way that replicates that ratcheting tension that you get in a horror movie. And I've always found, like, running horror in various other systems, it's very hard to maintain tension, table tension, as I would kind of call it. It's usually a lot of work, I find, on the GM's part in order to do that. So I wanted something that kind of would, again, provide a bit of like a mechanical scaffold that newer game masters, because that's something I'm also very hot on, is the game should be as accessible for someone who's never run an RPG as someone who's never played an RPG, to kind of lean on, and kind of creating horror and tension. Like, we put loads of tips in the book, but having something mechanical there really, really helps. So the Doom Clock is what we came up with. So it's a 60-minute clock. You can track it on the back of your character sheet, but also along the top of the screen, which is the way I would recommend it, because that literally puts it at the table in front of people and it physicalizes tension. And the way that it works is that if you fail a check and you roll one of these funky little purple strange symbols, it counts as 1 minute on the Doom Clock. There are also abilities that the strange archetype, for example, if they turn into a werewolf, that's going to have a Doom cost. If you let a key NPC die, that might have a Doom cost within the campaign. So if you let bad things happen, it will increase the tension and more bad things are going to happen. Because on this 60-minute clock, at 15-minute markers, we have what are called Doom events. So for all the stories you write for Shiver, we create Doom events. So let's use an example. So say there are a bunch of kids exploring a haunted house on Halloween night. So it's one of our adventures in the Cursed Library. So at 1:15, the old grandfather clock that everyone thought has been abandoned for years suddenly starts to chime and makes everybody jump. Everyone has to make a fear check. 1:30, all of the lights go out. So the electricity fully gets cut. All of the candles get blown out by a spectral wind. It's now dark. It's really hard to see. 1:45, something starts moving around in the house. Maybe we start adding some smaller enemies into extra rooms to kind of up the challenge. And at midnight, we usually introduce something that is a more permanent stalking threat. So the old master of the house, who was dabbling in some occult shenanigans, who is currently chained up in a coffin in the basement, suddenly wakes up and starts to move from room to room as a roaming enemy, hunting these kids down. And trying to get them and the Halloween candy. So in terms of that, you have the players don't see what those events are going to be. So they're completely hidden. But the game master, the director, has access to all of those. So whenever you're rolling your dice, we have a saying in the company as a whole, is that dice roll should be safe for tension. As soon as you're over-rolling dice, we feel that it starts to erode at the feeling of a game. Quite a lot. So for us, like if you're rolling your dice, something should always happen. So in Shiver, it's either you succeed and get what you want, you fail, or you succeed in a way that you didn't expect. If you get mixed little symbols, and we kind of interpret success in a different way, or you fail and you accrue some doom, and you potentially trigger something terrible happening. So the whole point of this is that I feel for me there's nothing more unsatisfying than rolling your dice and nothing happens, and that's your turn. And for me it's like rolling my dice and the thing that we found is that rolling my dice and knowing that I made the situation worse through my efforts in a horror game actually feels really good, because it actually it gets players biting their nails. It also gets them to think about how much they're rolling. So we found by adding this tension mechanic in, as well as like a direct consequence element to it through the doom clock, is you don't get the party gathering around a door that's locked, rolling to try and lockpick it or kick it down. Because what happens is, as soon as you do that, if 3 people fail in a row, usually it's going to trigger a doom event. Which then can be, if the killer suddenly appears or opens the door and is on the other side of the door, we suddenly are herding them away from the thing that they actually wanted because of as a consequence of their own action. So so that's the doom clock. It's there to kind of help game masters like build in unique events to their stories, and we talk about designing them in the core rulebook, but also to like help physicalize tension on the table and make players think about what action should I be taking and how much do I actually want to roll and do I want to risk it? Especially when you're at that 1 minute away from a doom clock event. It's always a bit of a nail biting experience of being like, who's going to roll next? Who's going to take that last action before something bad happens?
Well, in the game, we mentioned a few times with the archetype dice of die that you use in the game, and it has the different symbols on them. What made you choose to go with that approach to the dice opposed to doing, the classic a numbered dice or something like that?
So it actually came about really early on. So I used to run D&D for my old screenwriting group. And quite a few within that group were dyslexic and dysnumerate and really struggled with. And what I found is like with heavy numerical systems with that and Call of Cthulhu, there was a big jump, like in terms of for us, like kind of getting to resolutions, and there are a lot of elements that they were bouncing off of. So I just found like a free app where I could do some little doodles of symbols and be like, does this make it easier? And I was like, actually rolling more dice feels more fun. And kind of like looking for symbols also gave an element of, for the more improvisational amongst kind of players. Numbers don't really tell stories to me unless it's a 1 or a 20. It's either, something big or something small. What happens when you roll a 10? Like if you're kind of in the middle of the road, it always is a bit, how do I kind of gather meaning out of that? By doing symbolic, it also allowed you to kind of what we call reading the knuckle bones in the game. So say I wanted to kick down a door, for example. So I'd be looking for grit, I'd be looking for the fist. But I might roll a load of smarts instead. And what I could say as a director to a new player is like, right, you rolled a load of smarts there. So what I think happens is you kick the door, you stub your toe and you take 1 damage. But as you're hopping around, you actually notice there's a loose floorboard and there's some scratches at the edge of it where someone's evidently pulled it up. You pull that up and you find the key that allows you to open the door. So it gives a fail forward mechanic in terms of like finding meaning in the dice, but it's also great for new players, as that was a director led kind of approach to it. But what I often do with new players, especially younger players, is being like, you rolled a load of smarts. Can you think of a smart way that your character resolves this situation? And you actually encourage people to become a part of the story and add something to it, which I think when everything is fully numerical, players really struggle to do. Because it's the parameters are too open for them to do that. Whilst they know they have done a smart thing, not a physical thing, it kind of tightens the net a little bit. So it's speed of resolution, accessibility for those struggling kind of with the numerical side of things, but also storytelling as well.
Well, there's some really good reasons. I thought it would just be because I don't want to do maths would be the answer. So it's good to know that there's more to it.
That too. Like, I'm not a massive maths head personally, but quite often I'd like to do the maths behind the scenes in terms of balance, and then present as little maths as possible to the player in terms of design. That's kind of something I think I've tried to maintain with all the kind of other games we've been signing.
Yeah, sounds great. Well, thank you so much for sharing the game with us. As we've mentioned, it's a fantastic game for kind of one shots. Do you have any advice for somebody if they have an idea of their own TV show or film that they want to run? How should they structure their one shot? Are there any general notes you have on that?
So in the core rule book, we talk a lot about free act structure and like how that actually applies to like kind of the films that you love, but also how it applies to games, because it's really different in terms of how it kind of converts. I'd say for anyone like looking at their favorite kind of like film or TV show, is break it in three. So have a think about the kind of main beats of the story. So how I would tend to break it up is like, what's your inciting incident, your act one? Like, how does this begin? So what brings your characters together? What's the threat? And like, what is the thing that is pushing them forwards and keeping them engaged in the horrifying scenario? Because in the horror, the biggest question mark you will run into is someone who, and you always get it at a table, who just goes, why don't I just run away? And the two ways to do that is that the personal stakes for your characters have to be high enough that they don't want to run away, or they have to be in what I call a lockbox environment, which you'll see time and time again, kind of in horror movies, is somewhere where the players actively cannot escape unless they engage with the story, unless they engage with the plot and figure out a way to kind of move forwards. So that's kind of your act one. Then your act two is your fun and games. It's your meat of your story. It's kind of like what bits you want to reveal, like kind of what escalation of threat you want to have, what kind of creatures and what kind of subgenre of horror you're exploring becomes really important here, because structurally act two changes a lot. If it's gremlins, aliens, you've got tons of enemies. It becomes like a very different story compared to if you just have Michael Myers on his wands hunting you down. That like they are paced and feel very differently. But what I would say is look at the scenes that make up your act two, or sequences, I guess is kind of we would kind of call them. So if we take Halloween for example, like your inciting incident is Michael Myers has escaped and the town's notified, and your players are coming together because they're meeting up for a house for a Halloween party, or they're babysitting somebody. And then act two is kind of Michael invading the house, them trying to kind of get away, him stalking them through the community. And act three is basically your showdown. It's kind of it's either what is your thrilling moment of escape and catharsis for your players, what is your showdown with the monster? Do they kill it? Can they kill it? Or like dismiss it in some other way, whether if it's a possession or a ghost. Usually it's something that's a bit more ritualistic than absolute combat. And and then kind of how do you wrap that up? And I'd say the one question you want to always leave open is, do you want to do a sequel? Because, you know, like in any good movie, if it's done really well at the box office, your players are going to be asking for one. So, but if it doesn't do that great, and people are just like, oh, I'm not too sure if that was for me, you can go rent another movie and go try something completely different the next night. And that's kind of the beauty of it, is you're not locking yourself in to anything too tightly, because horror is so broad and you can jump around. And I think it's also good for varied game groups, because someone may love slashers, but someone may love creature features, and someone may love Weird West, someone may love space horror, and having that flexibility is really important. So the one last thing I would say as well for your game groups that's super important with horror is talk to your players a bit before what you're going to put in front of them, especially the stuff that like they enjoy kind of watching in horror movies and what they genuinely find scary. So this is basically kind of more like safety tools, but when you're doing horror games, it's really, really important, because we don't engage with horror as a genre to be horrible. We engage with horror for catharsis around the things that are horrible in our world and to have some element of release. So we should never really be running games that are there to make people feel bad. Maybe a little bit scared, but, you know, you want to avoid anything that anyone's phobic of. Or you know, or has a kind of really negative association with. So it's talk to your groups, find out what their likes are, what their dislikes are, what their hard no's are, break it into 3 acts. If it works, great, have a think about a sequel. If it doesn't work, try something new. That would be my main kind of points of how to kind of approach doing a Shiver game.
Yeah, that's a really good summary. Thanks. And like you mentioned, there's a lot of that advice written down in the book as well, so people can go through and digest it that way as well if they prefer.
Yeah.
Wow, I think we've covered it. Charlie, thanks so much for coming on and talking us through Shiver. If anyone's listening, the game is out and available. You can go to Parable Games' website and pick that up. So it's been out for a long time, and there's loads of different resources on there beyond the core book. So go and check it out. Before you go, Charlie, do you have any recommendations for any other tabletop RPGs?
Other tabletop RPGs. I'd say if you want a really fun, pulpy one-shot, or like kind of near one-shot, I'd really recommend Eat the Reich by our friends over at Rook and Descartes. It's also like one of the prettiest RPG books you'll ever see, as well. So if you love kind of your kind of comic books and like graphic novels as well, it's a really good spooky little treat about a team of vampires being sent to go and kill Hitler. It's very, very fun. So I think that would be my recommendation.
Lovely. Love that recommendation. Thank you. And best of luck with the Grim Gazette as well, which is crowdfunding live right now. So people can go check that out as well if you like the sound of that from the beginning of the podcast. But for now, we'll say thank you very much and goodbye.